Hello, what is up? My name is Vincent, and I'm happy to have you here for this very random video because why the hell not? Basically, anything that gets thrown on this channel is a bit random, but I'm trying to find my footing, trying to figure out what I want to talk about. For whatever reason, this came to mind. I love Konosuba. I have a lot of characters back behind me up on the shelf. Maybe I should have even put them down here, but anyways, I love Konosuba. They recently released a tabletop RPG that a lot of people have gotten their hands on. And I think that's exciting and fun, and I'm not to poo-poo on anyone's parade or to say that's a bad thing or anything like that. I think it's awesome, and I think it's cool getting tabletop RPGs based off of anime, translated from Japan, brought over to America. All that's awesome. I just wanted to point out some interesting things that came about for me reading Dice Queen's article about the Konosuba tabletop RPG. So I was just curious about it, wanted to read about it. It's sort of like a Ask Me Anything, what's on page 152, an introduction to the Thief class, just some random things here and there. Now, what's interesting is the basics of the system is a crunchy 2d6 dice system where the crunch isn't in the mechanics but in the character building. You really need to understand your character. So this actually somewhat reminds me of my tabletop RPG Otherworlds, where a lot of the crunch or a lot of the complications comes from the vast character building. There's a lot of depth, and you can make any character you want, really. And that's really where a lot of the time spent in the book is, and a lot of the pages are dedicated to, is the character creation system. And it's exclusively D6, and a lot of times you'll be rolling 2 6-sided dice. So it actually reminds me a lot of that. And actually, as I was reading through the Konosuba RPG, not only did I realize Otherworlds had a lot of similarities to it, but Otherworlds actually has a very J tabletop RPG take, and I had no idea because I'd never played a Japanese tabletop RPG. But an example is using 6-sided dice is very common, apparently, according to this article. Also, there's other things such as using skills in the way that they use skills as opposed to how it's referred to in D&D. And other Western type tabletop RPGs, the more tactical approach to fighting, skills being sort of more of abilities that you use, things like that. So I found all that really interesting to read. I also found it interesting that Dice Queen says somewhere in this article that there is a lot of typos and grammatical errors, stuff like that, which is a bit unfortunate. But the biggest thing that stood out to me and why I decided to make this video is, let me see if I can find it here. Okay. Any good guides to keep the same humor as the show? Honestly, watch the show and just be silly and goofy. The fun part about Konosuba is just a bunch of screw-ups meandering their way through life. Don't try to make an epic adventure and you'll have fun. Much like Konosuba, don't take yourself too seriously. I'm not sure if that's actually the quote I was looking for from this, but I know that essentially there's somewhere... Okay. Essentially, I just thought it was interesting that there wasn't a mechanic dedicated towards lending itself towards having fun. Now, obviously, playing a tabletop RPG with friends, you're gonna have a good time. I mean, you could play a super dark, grim tabletop RPG, and you're still gonna laugh and have a good time, which is kind of always a weird setting, a weird thing for me. That's also why it just doesn't necessarily... I mean, it could just be my GM style, but, if you try to take it so seriously, it's hard to kind of be in that headspace when you're wanting to also have a fun time with your friends. But I just found like it was a mistake to not have something specific to sort of lend itself towards the improv, comedic, people tripping up, failing... like Megumin's ability to just blow up something very powerfully, but then just being dropped out, just unconscious and basically useless for the rest of the fight. I feel like that should be integral to the game, and there's no indications that it is. Now, if I'm wrong, I would love for you to let me know. Also, they have an HP MP set up similar to Otherworlds, from what I can tell. But yeah, if I'm wrong about the idea that there's is there a central mechanic in the Konosuba TRPG? Because it doesn't seem like there is. And one reason why I wanted to bring that up is because I feel like, to me, if I was tasked with making a Konosuba tabletop RPG, that's the very first thing I'd think of. I would think okay, what is a mechanic in the game that can encourage people to naturally play this way? It's sort of like a D&D Pathfinder debate where You know, I've heard some people say, like, well, Pathfinder's better, and some people say D&D's better. And one of the reasons I've heard people say D&D's better is, you know, with D&D 5th edition, they have your sort of like personality traits listed on your sheet, where it's like, oh, convictions, connections, ideals, bonds, whatever it may be. And you can have all that for your Pathfinder character too, but because your character sheet doesn't list that out, it's not always at the top of your mind. And it doesn't necessarily encourage you to think about that. So it might be something that you don't really put a lot of thought into, or maybe you do. Maybe you do, but other players don't. So having a system sort of guide you towards that is something I think is good game design. So I do think Konosuba drops the ball in that regard. I think that it's obvious to point out grammatical errors, stuff like that. It happens, though. It's fine. But if it doesn't have a central mechanic for failing and being kind of a dunce and just tripping up over everything and being a mistake, then I feel like that is a huge miss for Konosuba. Now, with all that being said, funny enough, I do think this, even though I've made a lot of comparisons to other worlds, you know, my tabletop RPG, which I think is very comparable if you wanted a crunchy tabletop RPG experience. I like to think of it as a light crunch, though, you know, like a nice chicken tender. But if you didn't want to go with that, we actually are rebooting A Bittersweet Trick or Treat tabletop RPG, which does not have to take place during the Halloween, spooky season, fall season, nothing like that. But there are built-in mechanics such as, you know, your powers, but each power comes with drawbacks that you can choose. And then there's also deviations, which are ways that your character always falls short or has some struggles or whatever it may be. So it actually lended itself perfect to Konosuba, and I just sort of connected the dots reading this article while also rebooting A Bittersweet Trick or Treat, which you can expect to be on Kickstarter in October, so stay tuned for more information on that. If you love Konosuba, if you love tabletop RPGs, then you're more than welcome to jump into our Discord. We talk about anime, games, video games, tabletop games, all that fun stuff. We'd love to have you there. Again, not raining on anyone's parade that loves Konosuba or the tabletop RPG. I'm a Konosuba fan, tabletop RPG fan. The book looks cool overall, and obviously there's a lot of similarities to other worlds, so I can't hate on it too much because it seems like the person who designed it, we have similar design principles, so I think that's pretty cool. So with that being said, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought about this video or about the Konosuba tabletop RPG. Did I miss anything? You know, I don't want to be ignorant on the subject, so if you could inform me on something, that'd be awesome. And appreciate it very, very much. Take care and stay awesome.
Guess I have no choice. It's time to save the world.